Okay, today I'm going to have a little bit of some interview with Brian Schrager, and I'm calling this live from Facebook Prison because some of us share Brian's update, the Heim report each day, and we are been summarily put in Facebook jail or Facebook prison. Maybe I'll just start with that. It's a little bit on the sort of humorous side, but it shows that the power of social media and what they're trying to do to us. Because I'm one of the guys, I'm in prison. And unlike O.J. Simpson, who was released this morning, I'm still in prison and I'm looking for my thing. Here's just a little bit from Brian about what's going on. So let's start this over. Here we go. Um, do you know why you don't have a sound?
Us, all in the same day, were put in.
Okay, here we go.
Well, it's interesting. This last Wednesday, a team of about 10 of us, all in the same day, were put into Facebook jail when we were trying to share the Heim report. The Heim report is a kind of drudge report. It's a composite of stories written by other mainstream news media, many of them here in Israel. And so it's not fake news. There's nothing funny or strange about it. But Facebook decided somehow that it was spam, or apparently that was their decision. And all of us were put in Facebook jail until October 3rd or 6th. It could have happened for any number of reasons. To me, the most likely reason it happened is because a malicious individual or individuals decided to report the Heim report to Facebook as spam or something they don't want to see on Facebook. And if that's done enough on various posts, I suspect that then makes it into the Facebook server as being something that's abusive and they start blocking. I don't know. And if that is what happened, even if that is what happened, there's no way to know who it is. There's some suspects if that's the case, but no way to know.
Well, has anything like this? Yeah, has anything like this ever happened to you before?
Well, I have not been put in Facebook jail for this before. I was picked up by the Palestinian Authority in 2014 when I was living in Ben Jala, which is a city, a village really, that's part of Greater Bethlehem. I'd been living there about 6 months. One day I came to the lobby of where I was living, and about 5 men from the Palestinian Authority were there waiting for me and asked for my passport and said they wanted to take me in for questioning. And so they put me in an unmarked car, drove me down to their police compound in Bethlehem, a walled compound. And as we went inside, walking up the steps, my interrogator, Usama, who spoke English, told me, "You're here because of the things you write." And in fact, that was the case. They sat me down in a room with a wooden desk, and there was the boss was behind the desk with very badly stained teeth. It was like something out of a Humphrey Bogart movie. They took away my phone. I had texted a number of people to say, "Look, this is happening. Pray." So they took away my phone, and they were looking through it. And as they began to question me, first they sent me out of the room for a while. Then I came back, and they told me that they didn't like the things I wrote. They said, "So what did you think about the Pope being in Bethlehem?" He had been there just a couple months earlier, and I had written about it in an article that was published by the Jerusalem Post. I said, "Well, you know what I think." And, "Well, we want to hear it in your own words." So I said, "Well, I can't say it any better than what I wrote it. So it is what it is. You're one-sided." So anyway, all this to say, in the end, they said, "You're not safe here. There are people who are very unhappy about your presence." And I keep a pretty low profile. I had kept one. And so I said, "Well, who's complained?" Well, it wasn't Muslims. It wasn't Islamists. It was a group of people with an institute called Bethlehem Bible College. And their conference, and people affiliated with their conference called the Christ at the Checkpoint Conference. The Christ at the Checkpoint Conference is an evangelical version of the anti-Israel rhetoric that you hear and read all the time from the Palestinian Authority. But again, it's Christianized. And I have taken these people on fairly vigorously, and have had at that time taken them on in their the conference that they'd had in March of 2014. So my interrogator said to me, it's Christ at the Checkpoint people, both locally and internationally, who've complained about you. We can't protect you. You should leave. And so I talked to several people. They said, yeah, it's probably a good idea. And so that same day, I was forced to leave where I was living in Bet Jala, again, a part of Bethlehem. But the more likely suspects were, first of all, Stephen Sizer. Stephen Sizer is a vicar in England who has written extensively against Israel and against Christian Zionists, Christians who stand with Israel. He sent me a mocking tweet asking me if I preferred the hospitality of the PA over the, what do you call it, they call it the IOF, the Israel Occupation Force. It's kind of a common slur against Israel by those who are anti-Israel. They call it IOF. So he sent me a tweet, and I put it out there. It got written up in a couple of papers. Dexter Van Zyl wrote an article about it in Times of Israel, and a couple weeks after it happened, I also wrote something about it in the Jerusalem Post.
As of today, you and I and about 8 other people or so are still in Facebook jail or prison. We are allowed visitors, and the food's not bad. And I think, how can people help the Heim Report? What can we do?
Well, it's anyone watching, please share it yourself. Share the Heim Report link. We put it up as a link and also as a mem, and all the stories are listed with the link and the mem. And share it on your own personal page and spread the news. Say, look, we need help to get news out about Israel, what's happening. These are stories that Watchmen for Israel really need to be aware of. And that's really what the Heim Report is all about. It's to let people know what's going on from an Israeli perspective in Middle East events and really things around the world. Regarding Syria, regarding Israel itself, of course, regarding especially what's happening now up north with Hezbollah in Lebanon, and now Iran coming into Syria.
Facebook is all about wanting people to create groups and to share things as long as it meets their whatever they think is approved. And so it's kind of a bizarre situation that you can share anything you want, apparently, even some pretty awful things. But news from mainstream sources about Israel apparently trips some triggers places.
Apparently.
But anyway, we were just.
The frustrating thing is there's no way to find out for certain what the problem is. We're left guessing. We're just sent to jail summarily. We can file a response saying, look, this isn't right, it isn't fair, but we don't hear back from anybody. It's just that you're in prison until you're in prison.
There's no customer service number to call.
There isn't.
and as you and I have discussed, it's sort of I think it's a behavior modification.
Yeah, I think it is too.
Exercise because now before you post anything, they want you to think about it and maybe not post it because it's clear what it was, because there were 11 of us that were helping to share the Heim Report, and all 11 of us got put in jail.
On the same day. And
so
for sharing the same day while sharing the same thing. That's really unusual.
Right, and I'd only shared it to 2 groups, and it was on the second group that everything got shut down. Now, some have been, I guess some got out on bail, and some of us are still being held
one person is out on bail. That's 1 out of 11. The other 10 are still in prison. And we get out of prison either October 3rd or October 6th. My concern, and I know it's yours too, is that as soon as we start sharing again, that it will again be put back into jail, but instead of being put in jail for 10 days, it'll be 2 weeks or a month or even 2 months or 3 months. And again, without appeal or without explanation.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, people, you can help us out by help Brian out by going to JerusalemJournal.net or Jerusalem Journal Facebook page and sharing the daily Heim report. You put it out 6 days a week, correct?
It's out Sunday through Friday. So yes, those 6 days. And John,
Okay.
Aren't you kind of stuck in sharing your prophecy update?
Yeah, the same thing would go with my prophecy update, because I usually post it in a number of groups, and I can't post anything in any group. I can't even comment. So if people want to post my video, or people want to make negative comments about it, this is the week, right? Because I can't say anything about you making comments on my update. So it's a way to shut us down. But we did make appeals to people to share it, and I think you had a record number of shares.
Yeah, it was really amazing, because for one day we couldn't share the groups. That was Wednesday. We were all sent to jail. The very next day, you put something up on Facebook, and several others put up appeals as well. I think the biggest reach we'd had on Facebook before going into jail was perhaps 15,000. And in fact, just before we went in jail, we were reaching maybe 10,000 a day. The day after we were put in jail, 2 days ago or 3 days ago, Thursday, we reached 20,000 people. It's just amazing. A 25% increase, or depending on how you do the math. And yesterday, or Friday that is, we reached 19,000. So the views went up, dramatically up. So
well, good.
we're praying that with your help and with the help of those watching, that will continue.
So take that, Facebook, I guess, and I can post to my individual timeline. I just can't go to any group, like a prophecy group. There's a bunch of them been created. There's probably well over 100 that talk about issues about Bible prophecy and other things, and argue about everything, and have vigorous discussions with fellow believers. But Brian and I are in Facebook prison, so that's why I titled this week Live from Facebook Prison. And but I do note O.J. Simpson was released from prison this morning, but Brian Schrager and John Haller have not. So I don't take that personally. But we talk here about this convergence of the signs, and I have a few more comments from Brian later in the update about some of the things going on in Israel. And I've often said I ought to just stand up here some Sunday with my phone and talk about all the things that are going on that seem to be relevant relative to the state of the world that the Bible would prophesy it would be in the end times. And I think I could easily fill an hour or 2 or 3 with just the stuff pouring into my Facebook news feed, Drudge Report, other news sources that I check. The Heim Report that Brian puts out every 6 days a week. Almost every headline, I read these headlines and I look and I'm like, well, yeah, that's important, but that's important. And I mean, it's if you have ADD, it's like a dream to watch all these new feeds come in. If you have prophecy ADD, it's crazy. I mean, it's like the greatest thing ever, because you don't have to pay attention. You can change the subject every 3 seconds or whatever, like you would like to. So, and I can do that. Ask my wife. We have conversations every now and then, and she's like, "Where are you coming from?" I'm like, "Well, I've been thinking about this for 5 minutes. Can't you catch up right away?" And she looks at me. So, but that's we're getting along, So for almost 43 years, and going on 43. Look, this verse: wars, rumors of wars. Nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, famines, pestilences, earthquakes in divers places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. And it gets worse, but it gets really good it's really good at the end. We know that. And we have to hold on to that hope that we have. But it's crazy. I mean, this is a little thing I found about I don't know where I picked it up this morning about the sort of the White House. I mean, it's just like every day there's something else. And look, well, I'll share it later when I get to it. We had this thing with the NFL. Look at this editorial. No man should have to choose a job that forces them to surrender their rights. And somebody says, mind if I join you? Who are you? A Christian baker. And then I saw an article this week about, I don't even remember where, it might be out in Washington, I think, that a photographer makes up, videos of wedding, and he makes up these neat little, he uses his creative abilities to make nice videos about a wedding. But he says, I don't want to do same-sex marriages. And so what's happening now? He's being sued for discrimination. They're gonna run him out of business, just like they did the Christian baker, just like the bakery, I think, in Oregon, the guy in Colorado. That case is going to the Supreme Court, but I think there's been some things change, and I'm not so sure if that arguments are going to take place. They may have been postponed. But this is the state of the world that we're in. Mike and I, Clapham and I, will be speaking with Jacob Prasch at a Moriel conference this weekend, coming weekend in Langley, British Columbia. You can go to moriel.org and you can get the information about that. It's at moriel.org. Just on the right-hand side, it'll say Prophecy Conference. It's Friday night, October 6th, and all day Saturday into Saturday evening. And so pray for that, that everything will go well, travel will be safe. I'm still wrestling with one of my talks. I may talk about this, and you're like, Ready Player One. What are you? Have you lost your mind? This is a new movie coming out. Have you heard about this movie? It's being directed by Steven Spielberg. This is a place. This is called The Stacks. This movie, it's about virtual reality and the pleasure that people get and the ability of people to have an okay life in the stacks. Here, you see these homes stacked up, and it's pretty ugly. This is Columbus, Ohio in 2045. This is where it's set, right here. The movie is going to be if you go to watch the trailer, Ready Player One, it says, these are the stacks in Columbus, Ohio in 2045 where I live. And it's a miserable existence, but everything is great because I can put on this suit and these goggles and I can live an okay life. I can be whatever I want to be. Now, folks, this is Tower of Babel type stuff. It really is. And when you think about it, it's all connected. I mean, on the way in this morning, I put something on my phone and a thing popped up. It was, as I referred to him, Bruce Gender, speaking at some award show about for bravery or something like that. And PM goes, "You're not going to play that this morning, are you?" And well, she didn't quite say it that way. She said, "You're not going to play that this morning, are you?" But I heard, "You're not going to play that this morning, are you?" And I said, "No, I'm not, but I may talk about it." But it's you can decide anything today about who you want to be. You don't even have to be the sex that you're born. You don't even have to change your sex physically to claim that you're something else, or a combination of them, or neutral, or whatever bizarre combination you want to come up with. And you see there's a world leader that'll rise that will take advantage of that and say, you may have a miserable existence here. And we know that period of time is prophesied in Scripture, that 70th week of Daniel. there's a lot of bad stuff going on. And you wonder, is like, when you really look at it, it's like, how does this guy take over and people follow after him? The world wonders after the beast. And I think this virtual reality stuff plays right into that. So I may talk about that at the conference the other night, this Friday night or Saturday when I speak. But it's bizarre. I don't know how else to describe it. I feel like I'm living in some kind of virtual reality sometimes when I flip on the news or flip through the things that people send me. There's like a total disconnect. But look, I think God is preparing his faithful remnant, and I think we see God disconnecting faithful people from the world. We should be getting it that this is not our home. We're here till the Lord takes us out, but we know that we don't really have a great future here, especially a great future without the Lord. And this is an example. Hugh Hefner died. And I know that there's some thought that you shouldn't speak ill of the dead. And I've seen Christians posting this. And I'm like, really? I mean, really, people? Can we speak the truth? I pray that in the last moments of his life, he realized what he had done. Okay? And he repented. He accepted the gospel. He accepted the Lord as his Savior and believed. But we still cannot deny the damage that this man did to society. He picked up on Albert Kinsey from the Kinsey Institute down at Indiana University, where I have a degree from, that who was a real pervert and a pedophile. But it's changed society and culture. And Hefner picked up on it and was able to market it and make a fortune off of it. But the things that I've been reading about him, he had this great lifestyle, but I don't know how to describe it, but some of the things I read about how things went at the Playboy Mansion, it's like, it may have sold for $100 million or whatever somebody bought it for recently, but it sounds like it was occupied by the equivalent of, the crazy cat lady down on the west side of Columbus that had 87 cats in the house and lived among all the, the things that went along, or the people that have, 100 dogs and they never make them go outside to relieve themselves. And he lived in this mansion, and he destroyed a lot of lives. He destroyed a lot of marriages. And I've seen people defend him. It wasn't that bad. I really do think it was that bad. And I know that people are trying to say we shouldn't speak ill of the dead, but let's talk about what he did, okay? And let's hope that he somehow came to know the Lord before he passed on. Hurricanes. These are some pictures. This is a picture from St. Martin and the destruction there. And we're still not getting a lot of really good, solid video and pictures. Somebody was sending me a lot of things about Puerto Rico, some of the things that are coming out. I've seen, for example, here's a bridge in Puerto Rico. And this is all over Puerto Rico's like this. People are, I saw on NBC News the other night, or ABC, guy needs to go get gas for a generator that he has. He has to walk 7 miles each way every day in 90-degree heat, 90+% humidity, carrying these big gas cans. It's like the whole island had an EMP attack. No power, 90% of the cell towers are down. They're only able to get 10 flights a day in and out of the airport. Now I'm going to play now, and of course now there's a big controversy. I'm going to play a clip of the mayor. If you don't want to watch it, skip forward a minute. But I think what she says in this video clip is valid. This is a horrible situation. There's no water. There's raw sewage. People are going to get sick. The food. They're having trouble distributing things because the roads are impassable. Bridges are out like this. And so here's what the mayor of San Juan said.
Thank you for being there, first of all. Thank you for joining us tonight. You heard the president say today that his team, in his words, is doing an incredible job. And yet we heard that very emotional comment from the mayor of San Juan, mad as hell, almost moved to tears. What's the reality on the ground?
The reality on the ground is the one that your reporters are telling the American people. They're handing out maybe a bottle of water and one meal to a family of 5 or 6. And that was after 8 days. And some towns, not even that. I think it isn't a good job. It's a disgraceful job. The United States of America is the most powerful, wealthiest country in the world. And this is not a response that's demonstrative of our power and our wealth. And I'm tired of the president always talking about how much it's going to cost. It's costing lives, Mr. President, of children and the elderly and the infirm. And we should begin an operation to also evacuate people from this island, especially the elderly, especially those that have sicknesses, until they can return to an island to rebuild it. But right now, I think we also need to talk to. I was with the mayor of San Juan. We sat down with the director of FEMA this afternoon. Here's good news. Tomorrow, all of the hospitals in San Juan will be getting a regular supply of petroleum so that they can keep in operation. He promised me that tomorrow there'll be 1.7 million meals delivered to Puerto Rico and 2.5 million liters of water. And I begged and implored him, because I don't want to hold responsible the employees on the front lines. The command has to come from Washington, D.C. Only 4 days after the hurricane, the first 59 pallets of Ensure and Pedialyte and Pampers and medicines from Chicago arrived to the people of Puerto Rico. How is it that a community of people can organize themselves individually, and yet the mighty federal government has not done? I saw corporations and Catholic relief and Christian relief organizations supplying the people of Puerto Rico with more than the federal government. Let me just...
Okay, so listen, pray for those people, give the relief agencies. It is, and I understand, no, I don't understand. It's a difficult situation. They've lost everything, and it's 3.5 million people, but there are a number of other islands, St. John's, the British Virgin Islands, Anguilla, St. Martin, Barbuda, another one I can't even, Dominica, thank you. They've lost everything. I mean, everything, and it's island after island, and it's very difficult to get everything in there logistically. So, the United States sends a hospital ship 2 days ago. It won't arrive till sometime this week. It left from Norfolk, Virginia, and had to sail down there. And these things, it's a logistic nightmare. Look, it's a good preview of why you should take some reasonable steps to prepare yourself for something like this. You don't have to go crazy. You don't have to build a bunker, but have some water, have some food stored up. But look, and it doesn't help when your home is destroyed in a huge hurricane. But it is a difficult situation. So everybody needs to pull together. So here's an article in the Australian Spectator magazine. And I won't spend too much time on it because I see the time's rapidly going by. But what's changed in Britain since same-sex marriage? Listen to just a little bit from this. 4 years ago, they voted in same-sex marriage in Great Britain. And they made all sorts of promises. It's not going to change anything. You know, it won't affect churches. It won't affect freedom of religion. It won't affect freedom of speech. And what's the result? They lied. They lied. Listen to this. Current Conservative Prime Minister Theresa May has revealed proposals to abolish the need for any medical consultation before gender reassignment. Simply filling out an official form will be sufficient. There's actually a Ministry of Equalities in Great Britain. And, I mean, for example, here's some of the stuff from there. Proposals to streamline and demedicalize the process for changing gender will be a part of a broad consultation of the legal system that underpins gender transition, the Gender Recognition Act. They're changing everything. Currently, individuals need a diagnosis of gender dysphoria and have to provide evidence that they have been in transition for at least 2 years before they can apply to legally change their gender. Removing the need for medical diagnosis of gender dysphoria before being able to apply for gender recognition. The current need to be assessed and diagnosed by clinicians is seen as an intrusive requirement by the trans community. The government has also announced that the deferral blood donation period for men who have sex with men, and if you donate blood, which I do, you're asked a series of questions. And as you go through this series of questions, have you been here? Have you done this? Do you do this? Do you do this? It's like you get down to a really narrow pool of who can donate blood. And so the donation period, the exclusion, will be reduced from 12 months to 3 months, increasing the supply of donor blood available for life-saving operations. Because the American Red Cross calls the house all the time. Please come. If you donate blood, you know you get called all the time. Let's see what else they have here. Oh, so now they're saying churches, this is the minister of equalities, the minister of the Ministry of Equalities, says church should allow same-sex marriages and keep up with the modern world, Justine Greening says. Here's some headlines. Well, this is, and at the same time, listen, what's happened in Britain since they did all this? Political chaos. We're doing it here in America. We did it 2 years ago. The Supreme Court came out. What have we had since? Political chaos. That's my view. Now, I think messing around with Israel and forcing them to do things contributes to that. And I'd like to run an experiment. Leave Israel alone for like 3 months and see if things improve in Washington. I suspect that they would a little bit. We had this labor minister or a member of parliament in Great Britain who had to choose between his Christianity or leading the. He was involved in the leadership of labor. He had to quit. I told you about this a couple weeks ago. Look at what he says. To be a political leader, especially as a progressive liberal party in 2017, and to live as a committed Christian, to hold faithfully to the Bible's teaching, has felt impossible for me. I'm a liberal to my fingertips, and that liberalism means that I'm passionate about defending the rights and liberties of people who believe different things to me. Even so, I seem to be the subject of suspicion because of what I believe and who my faith is in which case we are kidding ourselves if we think we yet live in a liberal, tolerant society. In Great Britain, universities across the nation are threatening to mark down students who continue to use the words he and she. Instead, gender-neutral pronouns such as Z must be uniformly applied. This is Hull University. This is a headline from the Express, I believe, paper in Great Britain. In a heartbreaking development, and in spite of Britain's foster crisis, in other words, what's a foster crisis? They don't have enough parents to take care of kids who need foster parents. And God bless all, I know people that a lot of us know here, they're foster parents. They take care of these kids. They raise them for 2 years and then they're taken away. And it breaks their hearts, but it's like this unbelievable ministry that these people have, that they do. So they have a crisis. They don't have enough people in Great Britain. But here what is, aspiring foster parents who identify as religious face interrogation. Those who are deemed unlikely to celebrate homosexuality have had their dreams of parenthood scuppered. This month, Britain's High Court ruled that a Pentecostal couple were ineligible parents. While the court recognized their successful and loving record of adoption, they decreed above all else the equality provisions concerning sexual orientation should take precedence. How has Great Britain become so twisted? Practicing Jews, Muslims, Christians, and Sikhs who want to stay true to their religious teachings can no longer adopt children. Freedom of speech. In the lead up to the parliamentary vote, we witnessed almost incomprehensible bullying. David Burrows, a mild-mannered supporter of the Coalition for Marriage, had excrement thrown at his house. His children received death threats. His children received death threats. The people behind this are fascists and terrorists. They are the most intolerant bullies on the planet. Well, can we just have some politician stand up and speak the truth about this? We've had one who's tried, and what happens? He's called a Nazi supporter, President Trump. I'm going to start stuttering here. Many hardworking Brits have lost their jobs. Consider Adrian Smith, sacked by a Manchester housing trust for suggesting that the state shouldn't impose its rules on places of faith and conscience. Or Richard Page, fired for gross misconduct after articulating that children might enjoy better outcomes were they to be adopted by heterosexual couples. You can't even say that. And you know what? It's a fact that in most cases it's better. We have huge problems of poverty and crime in America. And you can go through those communities, you know where they are. You don't drive through them, right? Can I be honest? I mean, I have to drive through one on the way home if I go a certain way. And my wife goes, don't drive through there at night. Go the other way. And what you will find in that community, the central thing, the most important thing that you will find is lack of fathers in the homes. It is the single biggest indicator. It was, when I got my master's degree in criminology 40 years ago, that was the case. Then, in the African-American community, in poor white communities, the out-of-wedlock birth rate was somewhere around 20 to 30%. It's now, I hear, 77%. And you can't speak the truth about this, or you're a bigot. It's insanity. In retrospect, the silent majority in Britain has remained silent too long. Same-sex marriage was promoted in the UK as an issue of supposed tolerance and equality. What we have seen is the most unequal and intolerant outcomes of any political issue in recent history. And this person goes on to it, and he talks about the fact that in Australia, they're voting on this as sort of an advisory to the legislature, parliament down there. LGBT progress is an unstoppable tide. He assured me that it was okay to privately believe that marriage was that. He even privately agreed that the stuff being taught in primary schools was too much. But to say it out loud, how much more important, the last sentence there, the future of our children than any naive career ambitions I might harbor. And the Anglican Church in the UK, the first same-sex wedding held, despite threats of sanctions. Concludes with this: I urge every Aussie to examine the evidence, analyze the results, and be clear about what you're voting for. If it was solely marriage, it would be worth preserving. It's infinitely more. And I agree with everything that that man had to say in that article. So let's look at some things going on in the Middle East. I told you that I should just stand up here and talk about what's popping into my newsfeed. This was, I mean, literally, I was standing up back there getting ready to walk in here, and I threw in 3 slides. Last night in Edmonton, a U-Haul truck went screaming down the street. They found an ISIS flag in the cab. Patrick Poole, who lives here locally, great reporter on Homeland Security and terror issues. It's a terror attack. In Barcelona, they're voting on whether Catalonia should leave the Spain, become independent. Police ran in. Last I saw, Brian showed me a thing on his phone. I think it's on the Drudge Report. Over 337 people injured when the police went in and started beating up people that were voting about independence. It does seem like it's chaos out there. I mean, am I overstating the case? You can't even watch football. Everything's political now. I mean, seriously. Okay? I don't really care what their politics are. Well, let's put it this way. They went to college, so what do you expect, right? Even if they didn't go to class, it still seems to kind of seep through. And a lot of it's based on a lie. Look, there's a great interview Tucker Carlson did the other night with somebody from the DOJ. Look it up on Fox News. The guy has statistics about all the stuff, about all these protests, and taking the knee for this. It's all based on a lie. Police shoot more whites than blacks. It's a fact. That's what stats have shown for a lot of years. Heather McDonald at City Journal, read her stuff. She's phenomenal. So we have, this thing going on between North Korea and the United States and what's going to happen. There's a report out this week, preparing for war in North Korea. You can look that up. It's at, you can find it on the internet. This report here, it's a British think tank that put it out. See if I can. The Whitehall Report, Malcolm Chalmers, and says that thinks that war between U.S. and North Korea is a real possibility. There is some, and this is where I always get into trouble with everybody else. I get criticized regardless of what I say. So since I can't respond on Facebook groups this week, have at me, I guess. So this is good news. This is and I've heard this from military people, that this is out there, that there are these laser weapons that can destroy drones and other things like missiles. We just haven't used them yet because we don't want to let the Russians and Chinese know that we have them. But you need to understand too is that, while the United States appears to have the most powerful military in the world, we have a lot of problems. I mean, the entire Marine, all the Marine aircraft were grounded recently. All of them. We can't get spare parts for planes. And I know people in the Air Force, and I know that there are concerns about this, and I know that our military's been involved in a lot of things now for 15 years. We've been at war, and we're wearing people out. And we know there's a huge problem with, returning veterans and suicide and that type of thing. And so, I'm concerned. We know there's hypersonic missile technology that's been developed by a couple countries that puts our Navy at risk. Let's just put it this way. It's a wild and woolly world out there. Do you see when Matthew 24 talks about wars and rumors of wars? And which seems to imply that there's chaos, geopolitical chaos. It does seem to be that that's the case. I could sit up here and I could tick off. I don't talk about the continent of Africa. I don't really talk about Asia. I don't talk about Southeast Asia. I don't talk about Myanmar. I don't talk about Bangladesh. It's everywhere you look. Indonesia, putting in Sharia law. Supposedly a progressive Muslim society. They're instituting Sharia law. There's a lot of Christians that are being persecuted in Indonesia. Melanie Phillips and Caroline Glick both have great articles this week about the rise in anti-Semitism in the Labour Party in Britain. Melanie Phillips writes about melaniephillips.com, Caroline Glick, carolineglick.com, or at Jerusalem Post. And this is Melanie's article this week in the Jerusalem Post. And listen, Jeremy Corbyn is a rank anti-Semitic person. He hates Jews. He supports Hamas. Do you understand that? And I talked to somebody from Britain just the other night. He could become prime minister. And hardly a crackpot. Jacob Prasch told me that. He lives there. Valerie Plame. Caroline Glick talks about her. Remember her from being outed as an overt or as a covert CIA operative? The person who did it, by the way, was never prosecuted, Richard Armitage. The special prosecutor went after somebody, so who did he get? The Jewish Scooter Libby, on a trumped-up perjury charge, was made to plead guilty to a felony, ruined his life, and it was a message. You Jews, you need to back off. And Plame was quoting somebody this week, citing an article on her Twitter account. Oh, yeah, he's got it right. It was talked about how the Jews control everything. It's a conspiracy theorist stream. And they have divided loyalties, and they're dragging the U.S. into wars and all this. Now, she's backed off a little bit, but what do you think she really believes? I mean, she, you know, when the light shines on her, she changes her opinion. So you can read those articles. I don't have time to go into them. Caroline has another great article, which I think relates to us here in the United States, because I see a lot of parallels about what's going on in Israel and what's going on in the United States. And she talks about breaking Israel's imperial court. What's happened? The courts, the Supreme Court in Israel, has essentially nobody in the government they appoint themselves. Nobody can run on them, and they have declared themselves to have the authority to declare any law or anything that they don't like on illegal or unconstitutional. And they're running roughshod over it. So they've tried to put in Naftali Bennett and Shakir, one of the other ministers, have put in legislation to do this. But the legislation is a little bit flawed. I think Caroline's correct in that it sort of acts like they had the right to do this all along. And they're running, they have unelected judges running amok. And I will only say this. In the New Testament, it tells us that in times of persecution, believers will first be brought before whom? Judges and magistrates. That's why it's significant. And this is what's it's happening in Israel. You know, like, watch what's going on there and then wake up and pay attention, because it's coming here, it's happening there. Listen to what this the Supreme Court justice said in a recent speech to a bar association in Israel. There's a disadvantage that we flesh and blood judges have in comparison with the creator of the universe. Even in the situations where we understand fairly quickly the dilemma that has brought the petitioners before us, it often happens that the solution we view as just and proper is impossible under the practice and requirements of the law. These situations, in my view, are among the most difficult and complex cases that we as judges are called upon to contend with. How do we bridge between the law and what is right? Finding an answer to the question, discovering the secret, spice, is perhaps one of the greatest tasks that lies before us as judges. How about this? It's not your job to make it up. But look, I went to law school. I know what people are taught. So ISIS released audio this week. They're trying to determine if it's authentic about Baghdadi. He makes reference to North Korea, so some people think, well, maybe he's still alive, even though I recall that people were running around saying, we got him. Maybe not. This is going on, and this may be prophetically significant, this Kurdish thing. These are the descendants of the Medes. They maintain their ethnic identity for millennia. You can go read Isaiah 13, Jeremiah 50 and 51. It does talk about the Medes, and it may have something to do with the end times. I'm not sure. I think this is just another factor that maybe we need to consider. And they're voting their own independence. They're shutting down their airports. Iraq is upset. Turkey's going to cut off their oil flow. They have a lot of oil. Iran is cracking down on them. And guess who they use as their model? They run around waving Israeli flags because they see the rebirth of the Jewish nation as significant. Erdogan seems to be increasingly belligerent. Netanyahu is this morning, this is just from the Jerusalem Post a few minutes, within the hour, scoffing at Erdogan's claim that Mossad is behind the Kurdish referendum. There's a lady that went, Leah Khalid. She is a terrorist. She went to the European Parliament, talked about this, getting rid of Jews, and she was applauded. Happened in Europe this week in the EU Parliament. What does it say? I will bring all nations against you in the latter days. Oh, this is interesting. The son of Hamas went to the UN Watch. You need to watch this video. And he spoke. He spoke the truth. And I did a screenshot of one of the Palestinian delegations. So here, just listen to this, about 2.5 minutes.
Israel, the occupying power, continues with its colonial policy and its daily violations. It continues to abuse, to arbitrarily detain, to carry out ethnic cleansing, steal land and natural resources, uproot trees, steal money, Israeli activity to Judaize Jerusalem, demolition of homes, confiscation of land and property, spoiling of natural resources.
Racist violations perpetrated by Israel.
Israel continues to commit various forms of human rights violations in
North
Palestine.
Korea.
Israel, the occupying power, is advancing in its efforts of mass colonization and continued apartheid. Put an end to this colonialist regime.
Apartheid, atrocities
Venezuela.
and massive destruction inflicted on the Palestinian people.
War crimes, crimes against humanity, ethnic cleansing,
Iran.
and state terror.
Thank you, United Nations Watch.
Okay, now.
Shukran Sayyid Rais. I take the floor on behalf of the UN Watch. My name is Mus'ab Hassan Youssef. I grew up in Ramallah as a member of Hamas. I address the words to the Palestinian Authority, which claims to be the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people. I ask, where does your legitimacy come from? The Palestinian people did not elect you, and they did not appoint you to represent them. You are self-appointed. Your accountability is not to your own people. This is evidenced by your own total violation for their human rights. In fact, the Palestinian individual and their human development is the least of your concerns. You kidnap Palestinian students from campus and torture them in your jails. You torture your political rivals. The suffering of the Palestinian people is the outcome of your selfish political interest. You are the greatest enemy of the Palestinian people. If Israel did not exist, you would have no one to blame. Take responsibility for the outcome of your own actions. You fan the flames of conflict to maintain your abusive power. Finally, you use this platform to mislead the international community, to mislead the Palestinian society, to believe that Israel is responsible for the problem you create. Thank you.
All right. I think that was not what they're used to hearing, although from the Israeli delegation, they do hear that all the time. But that was great. Listen, this was a terrible tragedy, not a tragedy. A murder occurred in Har Adar, outside of Jerusalem. It sits sort of high up. You can see it from the road as you're coming from Ben Gurion Airport into Jerusalem along Highway 1. There's a monument there to the Harel Brigade in 1967 that took this area. It was under control of Jordan, and about 31 years ago, they founded this community of about 4,000 people now. It's a settlement. It's one of the settlements that people talk about. And this week, there's not too much sound with this video, but I want you to listen to this video. So they have, people have work permits to come and work there, Palestinians, and they come in through the checkpoints. And one of the people that came in through there came in, pulled out a gun, started shooting people, and killed 3 guards this week. And this is, you can turn the sound down a little bit. This is the funeral of one of the guards the other day. I only say this to, when we were there, we had our own encounter with these guards in many places that we went, since we spent time in Judea and Samaria. And they're kids. And I can tell you that when we walked through the checkpoints, the fact that we were Americans got us a lot of grace. But these guys were nervous. I mean, they were, because, why? Because they get killed. They get stabbed to death. When we went to Hebron, Joel Kramer, our guide, said, they ask you if you have knives. Why? Because they had people stabbed and killed right there where you walk through. When we came out of Nablus, the same thing. There have been people stabbed and killed at the checkpoint where we were held up for a little bit. And you begin to understand what's going on. But look at the world puts up with this. Okay, so I asked Brian Schrager a little bit about this. Look, I'm going to go over a little bit today. I know look, I only did an hour last week, right? So you owe me. Here's Brian. I asked him to comment on this morning.
Settlement. So what's the word there about the attack at Har Adar?
Well, they arrested 1, maybe 2 people. Har Adar, the community, had never had an attack before, and so it really threw them. It's an upper class community. They've not had a terror attack there before, and the young man working there who carried out the attack was in fact a hired laborer for a family in Har Adar. What came out afterward is that his girlfriend or his wife had recently left him. He was distressed, and so part of the narrative in the follow-up was that he was provoked to carry this out of the anguish of his own personal life.
Sure.
But on the other hand, Debka, the Israeli intelligence news service, noted that he carried out the assassinations he carried out the kills with the skill of an assassin. And so Debka proposed that he must have had some significant training in order to be able to carry out the executions with such efficiency as he did.
Yeah, for example, I think the report was his gun jammed during the shooting, and he was able to clear his gun and continue the attack, which really requires some skill and expertise.
Yes, it does.
How does Israeli society react to something like that now? Is there a push to rethink these work permits, which I understand there are something like 50,000 work permits from Palestinians that live in Judea and Samaria, or what they call the West Bank, that are allowed into Israel daily to work. Is there a push now to maybe dial that back in some fashion?
Yeah, there's talk about that. Whether or not it will be significantly dialed back, I doubt that it will be significantly dialed back. The really sad thing in this, as is almost always the case with Palestinian terrorism, is that the vast majority of Palestinians are not terrorists, especially those that are working in Israel. And that's where they're trying to provide for their families. They go into Israel proper because they can make better money there and support their families in a better way. And there are good relations between Arabs and Jews in Israel. It's really, really sad that that Palestinians are hurt. Palestinians simply trying to make a living, provide for their families, are really, really hurt.
Well, earlier this week also, there's no sound with this, Prime Minister Netanyahu went down to Gush Etzion and spoke about the 50th anniversary of these settlements that started being built after the Six-Day War. And he said, we're not going to be uprooting people here. That's not our intention. And this was at the celebration. Around the same time that this happened, our ambassador, David Friedman, from the U.S. to Israel, was interviewed by an Israeli news agency. And here's part of his interview where he was asked questions about a settlement, about the settlement.
What's your position on the settlements in the West Bank?
I think the settlements are part of Israel. I think that was always the expectation when Resolution 242 was adopted in 1967. It was and it remains today, the only substantive resolution that was agreed to by everybody. I think the idea there, I'm a lawyer, but I'll speak colloquially. The idea was that, Israel would be entitled to secure borders. The existing borders, the 1967 borders, were viewed by everybody as not secure. So Israel would retain a meaningful portion of the West Bank, and it would return that which it didn't need for peace and security. So there was always supposed to be some notion of expansion into the West Bank, but not necessarily expansion into the entire West Bank. And I think that's exactly what Israel has done. I mean, they're only occupying 2% of the West Bank. So I think that's consistent with Resolution 242. And that's been the basis for 50 years for the parties to proceed. Obviously, there's important security considerations to those settlements. There are important nationalistic, historical, religious significance to those settlements. And I think the settlers view themselves as Israelis, and Israel views the settlers as Israelis. And I think those are the facts.
So, well, I thought that was pretty good, And he talked about, he thought they might get a peace agreement within months or a year. And, the U.S. administration wants to work for that. And, everybody, we're supposed to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. So I guess people are going to push for the peace, whether it's a false one or not. But what David Friedman apparently doesn't know is that there's a number of State Departments. Okay, there's the State Department that David Friedman and President Trump thinks exist. And then there's the State Department that really exists. So they had a spokesperson come up and, well, they asked some questions about, what do you think about what David Friedman said in Jerusalem?
Are we good? Anything? Okay.
Ambassador David Friedman in Israel gave an interview in which he said that only 2% of the West Bank is occupied. Mm-hmm. Does that reflect the U.S. position?
So I've also heard about this report. And when you mentioned that figure of 2%, I don't know where that came from. That came from some report. I have no idea which report that came from.
Interview. It came from David Friedman's mouth.
Okay, I thought he was citing a report or something. Okay. So I'm aware of what he said, his comments, and I want to be crystal clear about this, should not be read as a way to prejudge the outcome of any negotiations that the U.S. would have with the Israelis and the Palestinians. It should also not indicate a shift in U.S. policy.
Well, do they reflect? So it does. So his comments by the U.S. ambassador to Israel do not reflect U.S. policy.
I just want to say it should not be read as a change in U.S. policy.
So
Yeah.
is this
Yeah,
this
that's-
is at least the second time that from this podium you've had to sort of clean up Ambassador Friedman's remarks. We had the alleged occupation. Is this becoming an issue? I mean, even if it's not a change of position, is the perception that the ambassador to Israel has his thumb on the scale and the view of this conflict creating problems?
I guess what I would say to that is we have some very effective leaders and representatives with the U.S. government, including Jason Greenblatt, Mr. Kushner, who are spending an awful lot of time in the region trying to get both sides together to have talks about, a lasting existence side by side. The president has made that one of his top priorities. And when we talk about top priorities here, we talk about the nuclear threat of North Korea, but also the nuclear and ballistic missile threat of North Korea. But we also talk about this. And I think it indicates just how important this is to the president that he has put those two in charge of negotiating that. In terms of the ambassador, I can't comment any more for you on that other than to say our policy here has not changed.
Sounds to me like you're saying,
Okay,
you're telling.
I feel like when I do these, you know who Mark Levin is. And I feel like, I mean, you should have heard Mark Levin talking about, you can't say that! He's yelling, and I'm always afraid he's going to have like a stroke while I'm listening to him. And I feel like when I see if I wanted, I wish my wife was standing here, because she could, need to give her like a little cattle prod in my pocket, like you're going too far. She's shaking her head back there. I can see you. I'm not looking at you, but I can feel that look. Spokesperson, I don't know what her name is, Barbie here. I said it. I feel like I should translate for you because it's like she's speaking a foreign language. And so I should have like a sign language or something or subtitle what she's really saying. Okay, here's what she's really saying. David Friedman, you need to shut up. Because you're not on board with the State Department that I work for. And, here's Brian. He had just a few comments about this. We'll do this, and I'd probably be done in about 5 minutes.
Are we good? Anything? Okay.
Ambassador David Friedman in Israel gave an interview in which he said.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about Ambassador David Friedman was interviewed the other day by one of the Israeli news sources and made some comments about, he was asked a question about the settlements that are located in the West Bank, or Judea and Samaria, as I prefer to call it. And he made a comment to the effect that, well, yeah, they're part of Israel.
Yeah.
And that's led to a lot of pushback. I know that it also came in the context of Prime Minister Netanyahu going up into, or down to, I guess, from Jerusalem, Gush Etzion.
Gush Etzion.
Is that how you say it?
He went down to Gush Etzion,
Gush
which is
Etzion.
very close by here, just like you said, south of Jerusalem. It's part of Efrat, if you know the Efrat community. So yes, there was a big celebration, a 50-year celebration for the communities in Gush Etzion. Netanyahu and a number of other dignitaries showed up, and I think it was at that or related to that celebration when Friedman made his remarks. Basically, what he said was, in addition, that Judea and Samaria are clearly part of Israel. He also said that Israel has only occupied, if you will, 2% of the so-called West Bank in Judea and Samaria, which it won back in the War of 1967, and they're not occupying the whole thing. Of course, the general rule that you hear here and around the world is that Israel is an occupier of the whole thing. And Friedman said no. So there's a remarkable situation. You have a U.S. ambassador here now, and his bosses at the State Department are saying, look, our ambassador doesn't represent us. The settlements, these Jewish communities, which in Judea and Samaria have been kept from growing for at least 10 years. And so there's pent-up demand for new space. And a lot of times this is building up, like building a multi-story living facility. It's not building out. It's not on new land. It's building within these communities. And by the way, this is also building in Jerusalem, because Eastern Jerusalem is considered Palestinian. West Bank, yes. There's no wall there, but when you drive, you remember Hebron Road, John, when you go down Hebron from Jerusalem, on the right-hand side, it's regarded by the international community as Israel. On the left-hand side, it's regarded as occupied territory. So even that construction is contested. Well, what Netanyahu has said is that he's going to build. He's going to allow these communities to get relief and get some housing units up. And for his part, President Trump has said, well, I don't like it, but I'm not going to tell you no completely. So he's kind of been playing both sides. But he hasn't said I won't allow it. He hasn't said I'm against it. He's only said I don't like it. I think it might be harmful to the peace process. So right now there is a plan to continue some building. We'll see how far it progresses.
And President Trump did come out, and essentially what the administration said was, look, you can build it, just don't have a party about it or celebrate it. I think that's my translation of it. One other thing, and then we'll go. There's a great article in Foreign Policy this week by Jonathan Spire called "Israel's Going to War in Syria to Fight Iran." You can go to foreignpolicy.com. I'll try to give Brian the link so he can put it in the description of this video on YouTube, or I'll post it on my timeline on Facebook. Not in any groups yet because I'm not allowed, but it's a great summary of what's going on the northern borders of Israel. And even this morning, Nasrallah was making some speech about Israel, the head of Hezbollah. And you have these Iranians there, you have the Russians, you have the Syrians, and we're sort of there a little bit, but not too much. We want to get rid of ISIS, but the fear is that we're going to leave and Israel's going to be left alone. And I think this has some significance. And he talks about the preparations that are going on in Israel, that this war is going to happen and we're going to have to fight Iran. So I'll just close with this, just a couple minutes. I asked Brian about this. He actually knows Jonathan Spire. It's a friend of his. They both write for the Jerusalem Post on occasion. And so here's what Brian said about this article from Foreign Policy. There's a great article in Foreign Policy yesterday, which I think was by Jonathan Spire, about Israel may have. Yeah, I was just going to say he is a friend of yours. Yeah. And I think it's a pretty good summary.
Oh yeah, Jonathan's brilliant. He's really smart, sharp.
Yeah, I think it's a great summary of what I'm not sure how to say this exactly about. It's a great summary of the situation that Israel faces on its northern border with Syria and Iran and Russia. And I know you looked at the article, and why don't you just give us your thoughts on that?
The essence of it is that Israel, in August, it went to the U.S., and either late August or early September, Netanyahu went to visit Putin in Russia, and in both cases they were making an appeal, in the one case to Trump and the other to Putin, to not allow Iran to move in right on the northern border, across the northern border from Israel and Syria. They wanted to keep a buffer of, I think, 60 kilometers or something like that. Well, in the U.S., they were very polite and kind, and they told him, though, that they told Netanyahu, or they told the Israeli representative not Netanyahu. They said, look, we're there to fight ISIS. We're not there to do anything else. We're there to kick ISIS out. And so there was no joy for the Israelis in Washington. And so in short order, Netanyahu went to see Putin. And again, he was treated very politely with kindness and deference. But again, the answer was no. Putin said, look, Iran's its own country, and we are working with it. They're allies, but we don't control what they do. Well, in fact, Russia is very dependent on Iran's support and underwriting in controlling the situation in Syria. So Iran, in fact, has moved right in across from Israel's northern border. And so what Jonathan is arguing is that when war comes, as it must, Israel is going to have to act alone against the Iranians in Syria. It cannot expect help from the U.S. or Russia in doing what needs to be done to prevent an enemy that is sworn to its destruction from, in fact, waging a war against Israel that threatens its very existence.
Okay, so listen, you can help Brian out. Share the Heim Report. Go to Jerusalem Journal Facebook page or jerusalemjournal.net/categories. You can see the Heim Report there. Share links to that around on your timeline and everything. Look, I ask people, I'm very grateful to my friends on Facebook. Brian, on a normal day, gets 100 shares of the Heim Report. I ask people, my friends, to share it, and there were over 400 off my Facebook page alone in one day. The viewership doubled, really more than doubled from what it was just a couple days before of his Facebook page or of his website, which is important to him as a journalist in Israel. They kind of judge your newsworthiness or whether you're worthy to be considered a journalist by the number of views that your website gets, so he can always use more views. It's a great summary, and I think he's right. It's like the Drudge Report of Israel news. And so support that. He can also use financial support if you feel led to do that. Trust me, he doesn't do it for the money. He lives in an area. I mean, you can see him standing here in Bethlehem doing this report. You can see the little bump in the horizon back there on the left side of the screen. That's the Herodian. So, I mean, he's right in the middle of it, and he's standing faithful, and he's even speaking to the point where he's ticking people off, and I think that's great. That's kind of a good clue that he's doing the right thing when he's in that area. So pray for him. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and let's go, and we'll pick this up next week. I won't be here next week. I think I'm going to try to do a prophecy update as part of that conference in Vancouver, but I'm just not sure when I'll be able to get it posted because we'll be traveling back home on Sunday. Let's pray. Father, thanks again for your word. Lord, I just pray that you will keep us calm in a really crazy world. Keep us focused on the hope that we have in you and in your promise that you're going to come back and take care of it. Pray that we'll trust in that, hold on to that hope, and give us the ability, the opportunities to share the gospel with others, because that is ultimately their only hope. Bless us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.